All right, well, let's get started. Everybody, you're aware that we are recording this tonight, and we are going to have everybody be muted for the first portion of this presentation. Thank you for coming to this Consciousness Cafe event. We're really happy to have our guest tonight, Shannon Torrence. I met Shannon some months ago. I don't recall the actual date, Shannon, but Shannon reached out to me and asked me if I'd speak on her podcast. I've been on this side interviewing people. That was my first occasion to be interviewed, and I'm so thankful. And then it occurred to me afterwards that Shannon must be talking to a lot of interesting people, and it might be fascinating to hear what she has to say about what she's learned over time. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, we'll start with a little bit of background. Shannon, tell us a little bit about because we're interested in metaphysical things, not so much the voice over work that you've done. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get interested? When did your intuitive skills first get manifested?
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for being here and thank you for having me here, Jim. You have been one of my most fascinating guests as well with a wealth of knowledge. I think that all the spiritual interest, I think for a lot of people is kind of a lifelong journey, and it's not that interesting. I mean, my story is not really that interesting. It's just sort of a regular life and epiphanies that happen along the way. But I would say for a starting point, I would say that I was always sort of agnostic, sometimes atheist in my life. And it was really when I went into a 12-step program for codependency that I had to accept a higher power. And that is when I started to do spiritual work. Even though I was slightly resistant to it, I was really willing to try anything to get myself out of emotional turmoil. So that sort of opened it up. But really, I would say I'm going to just start with where the pandemic it was right at the pandemic. I was doing voiceover and I lost my voice the year before, couldn't work, couldn't do anything much else. So I started to delve into my voice coach had me reading a lot of metaphysical spiritual books, and I read a lot of books written by mediums. I'd always been interested, loved Tyler Henry and Long Island Medium and just all
Mhm.
the shows. And John Holland, the medium, talked about how anyone can be a medium, and I wasn't aware of that. So I also was addicted to watching near-death experiences. And at that point, I started to study mediumship and started a podcast because I wanted to know more about near-death experiences. And I just think that I was at my lowest point. I was having really what we call a tower moment in the tarot world, and everything fell apart. And I just kept saying, Spirit, what is this? Like, why am I losing my voice? And what do you want me to do? So I just started to do a podcast with no expectations of what it would be. I knew I had a lot of quote unquote competition out there in terms of who's going to listen to my show, but the right people came at the right times and it all kind of worked out. So, and it just continues. I think, as you can attest, because you've had a similar journey where the more you learn, there's stuff I've learned where I used to think it was nuts, woo woo, crazy. And now I'm like, oh, aliens totally makes sense. So
Mhm.
I think the more I dive into it, the more I'm seeing how it all comes together.
Mhm. So you've delved into this for a while. For me, my early years were very personal. I didn't disclose to people that I was on this journey. Was it that way for you, or did you just kind of come out all at once?
I kind of came out all at once. I think I just never had a fear of it. Um, I just didn't. My mom said, maybe you don't want to put that up, talk about it online because you've got voiceover clients. They might think you're crazy. I just did it. I was so excited by it. I was so excited the more evidence I started to receive that there is an afterlife from you all, from people who shared their stories, down to when I started learning that I could channel spirit and give mediumship readings. I was blown away. I mean, I took classes with Medium Fleur and the Arthur Finley School, and I was in LA at the time, and I studied with Medium Fleur, who's a well-known medium in some circles. And first workshop. I had no experience. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Within 4 hours, she had everybody being able to pick up psychic information, mediumship information, just running us through exercises. And I left there, called my mom, and was so excited. I'm like, I was able to tell people things. I could describe their house. I described the dream catchers in her room. I said some building burned down, and this woman was like, yeah, our office building just burned down. I'm like, what do you mean? So it started to turn me on. I was like, I can't believe I walked in there not knowing anything. And within 4 hours, I was giving readings, like anyone can learn to do this
Mhm.
if you're open enough. And that just excited me to no end. So I feel like I had to be contained talking about it. I was just so excited.
So has that become a practice for you, doing readings for people? And
Yes. So I
is the
now give
frequency of,
readings.
yeah.
Yeah. And this is, 2 years, maybe 2.5 years in. Never in a million years did I think that I would be giving mediumship readings. I thought you were born with this gift,
Mhm.
that you just had to be one of the chosen ones. And granted, I'm not as skilled or experienced as the celebrity mediums, for example, but it's I'm always learning and always improving. And I've talked to some of them and they've said, "Do you think I knew what I was doing in the beginning?" I mean, I was the same. You just get better and better the more confident you get, and I find it to be true. And so, yeah, I want to scream it from the rooftops because I think what I do in my podcast is I like to have people on that are very grounded, relatable, and they're not coming from I don't jump into the higher level aliens and UFOs until we're in
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of that stuff turns people off right away. It did me.
Yeah.
And so I like to approach it from, hey guys, I also am a skeptic. I also wasn't sure about this stuff, but I'm getting messages from dead people. So it has to be real. And it's been great.
So here's a question for you. You kind of partially answered it. Is there an upper limit to this skill set you've been developing at? You say you're getting better and better at it. Do people tell you that you'll hit a peak that you won't go past, or do you think this will be something that you just continue to develop over the course of your remainder of your life?
I think I'll continue to develop. And I was just on the phone with a medium friend of mine. I reached out to her and said, something happened. It's like all of a sudden I lost my abilities last week. And I said, has that ever happened to you? I said, I couldn't connect. She said, I had the same thing happen last week. And she's amazing. She read
Mm.
me and brought a friend of mine through and told me things that nobody knows about him. And she was saying, maybe it's Mercury and shadow side. And I before would have been like, I don't know about that. But I'm like, this must be. So she said, we're always, and I've heard this from other mediums, there are times when you're just, spirit is flowing through you and you're communicating and it's easy. And then there are times where you're like, why isn't this working? It's not a perfect science. But I spoke with a celebrity medium recently. I got a reading from her, but really we just ended up talking about mediumship. And I said, I just want to be as good as you are. She has her own show. And she said, you are. And I'm like, but this thing happened on your show where you told somebody that the donor, like the person you gave your kidney to or something, like came through. And she's like, Shannon, it's all it's all camera work. She said, I sat there and struggled for like 5 to 10 minutes until I got that information. But they not that she didn't have it, but just that we're all human beings processing spiritual information through our limited human brain. And sometimes it's incredible and the validation that comes through will just blow you away. And sometimes it's sticky and it's not as easy and it can depend on your health. After I had a bad reading last week, I got a horrible migraine and I was like, that's probably what it was. So we're all continuing to learn and spirit continues to teach us, continues to show us new symbols, new ways of communicating, and our mediumship changes as well. I've
Mhm.
been told that spirit learns new ways to communicate with and
I
through you.
I hope that this is encouraging a lot of people that are on today.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe there's some people who are in kind of a similar situation that kind of thought, well, this is something I want to try, but I don't know if I can really do it. And it sounds to me, Shannon, as if you had those kinds of doubts, but
Yeah.
you put some attention to it, got some good coaching, and look where it's leading you.
I ended up getting a tattoo that says trust because no one jumps into your first mediumship reading and says, I got this. Like, it's fine. Or when you get a no from your sitter, it's so common to start to panic and to get in your head and start overthinking. You, what makes a good medium is literally just learning to relax and trust. It's not about your skill. It's about being able to just be calm and receive and
Letting go.
trust
Yeah.
and let it go.
So I've been pondering at this next question for a little while now and see what your thoughts are on it. I've never thought of myself as having mediumship skills, but I did have a couple very successful remote viewing exercises. And it seems that maybe in the way that you do that, you have to relinquish the logical control and let your subconscious um, present whatever it's going to present. And I wonder if it's the same thing with your work you're doing, that maybe if you're good at mediumship, you could be a good remote viewer. If you're a good remote viewer, you could develop that skill in a mediumship capacity.
Absolutely. It's all the same. I accidentally ended up remote viewing in a reading, and I didn't know that I didn't, that wasn't even part of my equation. I was speaking with a woman and I said, let me just have your mom show me your house and let me see if she can show me around. And I said, okay, behind you, I started to describe the house. She said, that's exactly the layout. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, I'm like, I want to go in the room on the right. I said, I can tell this is your junk room. I'm not judging you. I can see that this is where you put all the things you don't know where to put. And she said, yes. And I said, I'm just going to walk in there. And I just closed my eyes and I just went, okay. And I can see there's a bed in the back. And it's kind of, I said, but you don't have any bedding on it. And there's a suitcase. I said, I'm seeing a Raggedy Ann doll. And she goes, hold on a second. She took her iPad, walked me in there, flipped it around. There was a Raggedy Ann doll sitting on the dresser with some other stuffed animals. And I was like, that blew my mind more than even spirit communication because I didn't know that's what remote viewing even was. I just intended. I
Mm-hmm.
intended to take a tour of her house. And I said, Spirit, just take me there. Now, did Spirit show that to me or did I connect with her energy? I thought I was expecting Spirit to give it to me, but I think what happened was that I physically took my consciousness to that woman's environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but anyone can do it. It's just letting go and trusting what you see and not thinking, not analyzing. Just go with it. Just go with it. And who cares if you're wrong?
So when you're giving a reading, you're communicating with someone. So there's a part of your mind that's occupied with that communication. There must be another part of your mind that's perceiving these images,
Yes.
and you're finding a
Yes.
way of articulating whatever that subconscious perception is. You can put that into words.
Yes. And I want to share this with all of you too, because I tell people this in terms of developing their own abilities, even if you don't ever want to be a medium, just in your life or sensing your loved ones in spirit. This is what took me the longest to get, and it finally clicked. So when I used to do mediumship readings in the beginning, I had to close my eyes. It's like, I got to be in my own little thing. And I said, how do people give readings with their eyes open? It's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach. It's just, I'm talking to you and I fully hear what you're saying. What I'm also doing is noticing my subconscious thoughts. So if I tell you, imagine an apple right now, you can imagine an apple, but where are you really seeing that? Not with your eyes, but you can see it in your mind's eye. So if I'm speaking to you, sometimes I'll just suddenly see. It's just shifting your awareness. All through the day, we have all these thoughts. We're not that run through our mind that we don't even really consciously hear unless we're tuned in. And if you stop and notice, you'll notice that you're thinking a million things, you're seeing a lot of things. We just tune it out because it would be too overwhelming and distracting. But when I consciously tune in, I look at you, and then in the back of my mind, I might see. I read someone last week and I said, I'm seeing a field of tulips, just a field of tulips. And she said, yes, my husband in spirit, we flew over Holland and there were all these tulips and we looked at all the fields from up in the sky. And I just got chills. All of those things are so subconscious. The same with names that come through. That's a little harder sometimes it's my own thought. I'll just hear the way you think of like your best friend's name, and you hear it in your head. So if I'm reading you and all of a sudden I hear Judy, it just, okay, well then you have someone in spirit named Judy. It's all these subtle things, and sometimes it's just a knowing. But you're absolutely right that that's what it is. It's training yourself to sort of feel differently, not think differently, feel differently. Just in the way we interact with the 3D world, you have to kind of learn a new way of focusing. And I focus on the back of my skull, like or in between my ears. It's a weird thing where if I want to hear a name, I'll be like, what name feels like it's drifting sideways through my brain? So it's just a different way of paying attention to what's happening. So many of our thoughts every day are actually coming from spirit, and we don't even realize it. And it's that intuition. Don't get in your car right now. And then you get in a car accident. And you just thought it was you being, I'm just being lazy, or I don't want to drive. A lot of times that voice is actually spirit saying, don't get in the car. And that's what we have to learn to perceive, is not to live in fear every time we hear don't go to the gym, because that could just be you being lazy, but or tired. But there's so much going on beneath the surface, and all mediumship is spending every single day in meditation to listen to what's really going on. And then we practice by giving readings for validation, and that's how we know if we're right or not. And then you start to feel what that feels like when you get a validation. And it's a subtle difference. When I'm seeing that field of tulips, I'm like, I'm going to go with that, because that's not something, I don't know where I got that from. It's things like that.
I sometimes participate in a group gathering on Sunday mornings. It's called The Path. And most of the people who participate are either healers or intuitives or both. At the end of for the last half hour of that gathering is dedicated to bringing messages from spirit. And it's fascinating to be a part of that, because I've had messages come through to me, and it's been very clear that the person who's giving the message wouldn't know anything about the message being significant for me. They just offer it out. It came to them, they offer it out, and more often than not, there's something to it. I'll give you an example. I have a deceased brother who has come through on a number of occasions. And I've been thinking of writing a book for some time. And so he came through and said, you got to tell your story, Jim. So I'd start writing. And the next time he came through, Jim, your brother's coming through and he's really happy with what you're doing. But then the next time I would have stopped the writing, other things just kind of got in the way. And he would come through again and say, you got to get back on writing that book. Well, the intuitive wouldn't know, first of all, that I was planning on writing a book. Second, they wouldn't know the flow, that, okay, it's flowing now, so your brother's happy, and now it's not flowing and your brother's kind of kicking you in the butt again. So for me, it's validation that these people who are providing these readings are acting as servants. They're helping bridge that communication gap that our loved ones on the other side really want to be of help. And it might not just, well, let me pose this question to you. Do you get information from other people's guides, not just from deceased loved ones, but from guides?
My medium friend and I were just talking about this, about how that's not really her specific forte or mine, only in that we don't have the valid, like, we just don't have, we were saying sometimes you don't know where it's coming from. And she said, sometimes you feel like you're making it up. And my teachers have told me, don't worry, because we get worried. Like, I don't want to be a sham. I want to make sure that I'm really delivering messages from spirit.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's very clear because I'll get physical sensations in my body. But if I'm telling you something, I don't know if I'm talking to a guide or an angel. I know when I'm talking to a person, only because I can get a sense of, yeah, that's grandpa. Like, he's telling me he's grandpa. We probably are, but we were saying that it's uncomfortable when people ask us, well, can you give me messages from my guides? And we're like, I mean, I maybe am, but I'm going to try. I just personally, that's not my strength or what I'm most experienced in. But I do know that we were both saying that sometimes when we're not making a strong connection or we feel like we're just not getting a lot, sometimes we just switch gears and we say, okay, I'm just going to trust that everything that I'm saying is what this person needs to hear today. And I've asked spirit in advance, please show up. Please let me be a channel and let all the messages be in this person's highest and best good for their healing, for their comfort, whatever they need today. And so I stopped worrying about where am I getting this from? Because all I know is I'm getting letters back from people saying that meant it resonated. And I'm
Hmm.
going, I feel like I just made it up. But like I said, the people I trained with said that's what mediumship is. It's you're using your imagination. And so it's going to feel like you're making it up. I think that before you start doing mediumship, you think it's going to be something dramatic. Like suddenly I'll see your father standing behind you and he'll just feed it all to me. But no, knowing your father's there is something I just feel. I feel it. I feel him standing there. I can feel his energy. I can feel, is he a stiff person or is he a warm person? But I do also ask spirit guides, hey, if you want to chime in, just let me speak the words that this person needs to hear. Doesn't matter. You don't have to tell me your name. I'm not going to say, oh, yes, you've got a spirit guide named, Calliope. I don't know if I made that up or not. I just have to go with it. In fact, one of my spirit guides, I've named Calliope only because that's just the name I heard. I don't know if that's really their name. And in fact, from what I understand, they don't really care. The names aren't important. I
Hmm.
just say Calliope because I asked and that's what I received.
Hmm.
But I could have made it up for all I know.
Yeah. How about symbolic messages? I had a reading, one of my first readings. In fact, I think it was the very first. I asked friends for the name of someone they trusted, and I had a reading. He had my name and my credit card number. That's all he knew about me before this phone reading. And he explained at the outset, sometimes he gets things symbolically, and he'll tell me what he's getting, but he doesn't know what the relevance is.
Yes.
So the first thing that came to him was he said, I'm seeing somebody dressed like Donald Duck. Is there anybody in your family named Donald? And my deceased father is named Donald. So my question to you is, does that happen with you? Do you get symbolic messages that you don't know what it means, but when you put it out there to the person you're doing the reading for, it has a lot of significance for them?
Yeah, that's actually the bulk of what I do. In fact, I always start my readings saying, you and I are going to play a game of charades right now. I don't know what these things mean. You and I are going to solve the puzzle. So, for example, again, it's all seeing, feeling, knowing, and we're putting all of our clairs together, which is sentience, which is your feeling, clairvoyance, which is your seeing, and that sort of thing. So I did a reading and I said, I'm hearing the names Peter and Kent. She said, well, they were my uncles, both of them, and they were best friends. And I said, that was, I don't know, I'm not always that good, but this was one of those I remember because I was so like, I got both of their names. And I said, okay, now I'm seeing he's showing me a storm cloud, and I'm seeing like sun and a cloud, and all of a sudden there's a storm. And now I'm seeing a duck, like a rubber duck. And she goes, I know exactly what this is. And I'm like, tell me. She said, Peter was a sports fan. And after he passed, I went to see my brother in college, and he played for the Oregon Ducks. And me and my sister got there, my friend, whatever, and it was sunny and everything was great. And all of a sudden it starts pouring rain, and we're just standing there watching this game, but we're drenched. And I'm like, he's telling me he was there. He's just acknowledging that he was there for that. And she said we were laughing so hard. It was like a fun memory. It wasn't, I mean, that's when I know this is real. That's when it's like, okay, there's, even if I'm not always confident about, am I channeling well today? I always bring myself to that one, because I'm like, okay, there's just no way. And then another one I always bring myself back to is I was doing reading in a practice group of other mediums, and I said, I hear Jojo. I kept hearing Jojo before I came into this, and she said my husband's name was Joe, and I called him Jojo. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, I'm seeing a firefighter. She's like, he was a firefighter. And I said, now I'm seeing like these little animals. I'm seeing a rhino, a rhinoceros, and a dragon. And she said, we used to have this little terrarium, and in it, we each had a little figurine. And for our family, our kids had some, and she's like, he was the rhino, I was the dragon, and the kid. So I'm like, that, I just was like, your kid, that's crazy. So
Mhm.
it'll just appear to me, I'm just seeing a rhino. I don't know what a rhino would mean to you, but she knows. And that's really all that matters. In fact, I'd say, I'd love to hear the feedback, but you don't even have to tell me. As long as you understand it, that's how they communicate, because they're at such a high frequency.
Yeah.
They can't speak full sentences because we won't catch it. So they have to implant telepathically images, words. Some spirits are amazing at it, and some are a little more quiet and reserved, and some are new to the other side, and some have been there longer. And I find it sort of depends on the personality, the time frame, how deep in grief the person is. Sometimes the spirit's just talking to me like I'm like, just tell me and I'll tell them. And then sometimes I'm sitting there like pulling teeth. And I don't know why, but apparently that's normal.
Do you have to put yourself in a receptive frame of mind, or do things like if you were in a store, and I'm thinking that the Long Island medium,
Yeah.
for example, it's like she'll, I don't know if she's intentionally doing it, but she walks into some place and she starts getting messages for someone. Do you find that it happens spontaneously, or do you need to put yourself in a frame of mind to make it happen? Or maybe.
Both. I would never take a chance on a paid client, for example. And I always meditate for like, I used to do like an hour, but now I just do 20 minutes beforehand. I say a prayer. I do a whole thing. I mean, you don't have to. This is just what I do. Just to kind of, I try to raise my vibration, and I smell essential oils, and I just get myself feeling good, and I ask spirit. But there have been times it just sort of floats in, like, and I don't even know why. Recently, I was just sitting here where I'm sitting right now, and all of a sudden I heard Chanticleer. I'm like, okay, I know what Chanticleer means in French. It means clear singing, or clear, yeah, clear singing, really. And I happened to be texting with a few people. One was my mom. So I said, by any chance, does the word Chanticleer mean anything to you? And she said, yes, it does. She said, I was on Amazon, and there's this album I want called Chanticleer, and they don't have it. And I've been trying to find, just this week, I've been trying to, now I don't know if that was, I don't know why I heard that, but I don't know if I read her psychically because she's very mediumistic herself, or if it was a spirit saying, I felt, I said, I think it might be grandma just letting you know that she's there. She's
Mhm.
aware, and that she's speaking to me. And sometimes I'll just be talking to someone, and suddenly I get a rush of energy, and I'm like, there's a spirit here, but not as much as I'd like for that to happen, honestly. But I do find that when I'm talking to someone, like I was at a party recently and she said, "Oh, you're a medium." Yeah. And she's like, "Really?" And I said, and suddenly I felt what I call spirit tingles. I felt someone come in. And that doesn't happen all the time. And I said, "There's a younger guy with you that took his life?" And she said, "Yeah." She started bawling. And that just like then I was like, well, I don't really know what the message is. I just know that he's here. And it's probably not, I'm not, but I told her I'd give her a free reading later, and which I am doing. Because I was like, I know that there's a message. I don't know
Mhm.
that I can keep flowing with it. I just know that all of a sudden I was so aware of his presence. But it doesn't happen at the grocery store, or if it does, I'm not going to approach somebody anyway, unless I get super strong spirit tingles and someone's really like, "Please, please, please tell my mom this," but
Yeah.
that hasn't happened yet.
Well, I'm sure there are a number of people that are kind of nodding their heads in agreement. Yeah, it's that way for me. I know we have some people on the line tonight that have this
Yay.
capacity. But I also assume there's some maybe people who've been thinking about it that maybe I'm hoping will take some encouragement from what you have to say. What I'd like to do is transition into talking about your podcast experiences.
Yeah.
You've been inviting people to speak on your program, and I'm curious, as I said at the outset, I'm curious, what have you learned? What are the more interesting things that, as people have come in and shared their stories, what kind of stories have you found particularly interesting? And are there any that maybe have helped shape your understanding of how this broader reality works?
Yeah, that's a great question. Excuse me, my nose keeps itching. Um, yeah, I think what I always knew from having watched a lot of NDE testimonials is that there's this common thread through all of them. So everyone might see something different, or some people don't even see entities. Some people just kind of are in this vast space. But it's very validating to me anyway. That skeptics might say, well, when you die, your brain is shooting out endorphins, is trying to protect you from fear and pain, so you're just hallucinating. So my question is, if thousands of people are hallucinating, why isn't this guy seeing a pink elephant at a carnival and this guy isn't seeing like, you know, like cats, and the next person is seeing like Paris? And it's the common thread is that they're all have said to me that, I mean, to the, not all, but generally what I hear is they were being communicated with telepathically. So there's often this just all of a sudden knowing, just a knowing of, oh my goodness, I get it now. Everything starts to come together. Their understanding of their place in the universe, their understanding that that love is the most important thing, their understanding that we are all one. We are all connected to the same source. And that's something I think anyone who's taken an interest in this topic pretty much understands. But when you say what's interesting, I mean, what kind of takes it to a, not that that isn't interesting in itself. Lately, as I said, I have suddenly started speaking to a lot of near death experiencers and mediums who are mentioning multidimensional beings and aliens and UFOs.
Mhm.
Now, I always thought that stuff was cuckoo. So, I I was always like skeptical about that stuff. I was like, it's probably government stuff. I mean, not that can't happen, but seriously, are people, I don't know. I just didn't really buy it. But suddenly, what I'm sort of to answer your question, it's what I'm learning is that I'm expanding my understanding of what the other side is. So I remember going to see the movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey when I was young. I was so bummed out when it wasn't really aliens. It was spirit. I was like, that's so lame. That's stupid. And
Mhm.
that's all this buildup for nothing. And now I understand. This is, I think, my biggest revelation is that it's all part of the same system. So it's not like UFOs and aliens and we and God and whatever, you know, you want to call the source, we're not separate. It's all the same stuff. And I think what has been interesting to me is to also find out that we aren't just reincarnating, at least, you may not believe that, but what I'm understanding is we do reincarnate, but we don't always reincarnate in this world. Never even thought about that.
Mhm.
Sometimes we reincarnate on another planet or in another galaxy or dimension, and we are these other beings. And like I said, I used to think that was so crazy, but now I'm starting to, what's that phenomenon where once you learn something, you start to see it everywhere? There's a name for it. I'm starting to be like, I get it. I get it. And it helped what all of these stories have put together for me is that I have seen interdimensional being. An interdimensional being when I was young, and I thought it was spirit. But I now understand it was a bright blue orb that appeared in my room, hovered over me, stared at me, looked at me, and then shot back and forth in my room and shot up in the air. My whole life, I was like, what was that? So now I'm starting to understand that the other side isn't just one thing. It's not, and it's also not, also sort of knew this, but the other side isn't an other side. It's actually right here with us. I personally don't believe in heaven and hell. I believe that it's our consciousness is what creates our own heaven or hell. Like this is hell, what we're going through now. So a lot of it is understanding that it's all happening at the same time. It's happening within us, it's happening within our environment, and it's happening right next to us. And that energy just keeps circulating and recycling and moving to different bodies and places. So basically it's like it's bigger than I even thought, I guess is where I could start or to answer that question.
So I got a couple thoughts that go through my mind. One is most people think first from a human perspective.
Yeah.
So when you think about aliens, that's a human perspective. And I think that's what you're saying. They're not aliens.
We're aliens
They're
too.
no different than us. We are first and foremost conscious energy that chose to have a human experience. Conscious energy can choose to have an experience in a different place or even a different dimension. So aliens are not different. They're just not currently deciding to participate in a physical life on this earth. Now, the fact that it sounds, let's see if you would agree with what I think you said. You're seeing this trend in your work toward more engagement with non-human energy. And I want to share something that could very well be a part of the talk that Jen, Caitlin, and I are going to give at IANS next fall. Jen, as I mentioned earlier, does Life Between Life Reviews, a Michael Newton Institute person. And she told me recently, she hadn't shared this very broadly, but if she looks at the trajectory of what comes through on Life Between Life Reviews, she's seeing more people coming through that are sharing their existence in other planes, almost as if there's a heightened interest in the broader scheme of things beyond Earth, a heightened interest in either or both, either wanting to have an experience here or recognizing that this is an interesting time and they want to be a part of this.
Oh yeah, that's such
So
an interesting perspective.
yeah, it challenges you if when you stop thinking about it from a purely human perspective and start thinking, all right, I'm spirit. I chose to come here. Others are now choosing to come here. There was a guy, Christian was his first name, and maybe Daniel.
Christian Sundberg?
Yes.
Yes.
His story it wasn't really a near-death experience, I don't recall. I think he just spontaneously became aware that this life he's living now is the first life that he's had as a human. And he chose to do this because in the non-physical, he ran into another entity that he was so impressed with how evolved this entity seemed to be. And he posed the question to him, how did you get to be this way? And the entity said, well, I've had a lot of lives over on that neat little area called Earth. So Christian decided, well, maybe I ought to try that, and wanting to emulate this this higher vibrational spirit that he had met. So it's fascinating to start thinking about where things are going. You know, when you step out of just the pure human side of things and ponder whether there's something bigger that's going on. The fact that you're seeing this, that Jen is seeing it, I wonder how many others are out there that are open to these things or experiencing these things. And if we start talking about them more, might others start participating in that? And it's just kind of a fascinating.
Yeah, it just goes so far beyond what I knew when I started. It's
Mhm.
it's like one of my guests said, like, we are the alien, we're aliens too. They're only
Mhm.
aliens because we haven't seen them before in regular life, but there are all sorts of forms that we can take. And I just am starting to speak with more and more people who are very normal, rational people saying, yes, I see UFOs constantly because now that I'm aware of them, I communicate with them. And as I said, if they had said that to me a year ago, I would have been like, you're right. But now I'm starting to see that, wait, I have seen a UFO. I dismissed it kind of. Okay, like I started hearing more and more, but also just the fact that it's like spirit, what like our consciousness, life on in other galaxies and dimensions. It's all it's all part of it. And it's all part of our I think that the reason that we're acknowledging it now, apparently, I spoke with Lily Nova on one of my episodes. Normally I interview near-death experiencers, mediums, out-of-body experiencers, but then I saw Lily's interview elsewhere. And I had her on, and she is a normal person who started doing astrophotography. And then she began to receive downloads and messages from these beings. And now she just, every day, they're like her friends. She just sees them. She takes pictures of them. She puts them on her website. She's a young, beautiful, normal person. And she now sees them regularly, and they channel messages. And part of that message is people are awakening to this because they're actually here to help us, just as the spirit world is. They want us to evolve. They want us to grow and learn and to thrive. And when we talk about all the horrible stuff that's going on in the world today, a lot of us lose hope, and we're like, we're all going, it's apocalypse. We're all going to die. Everything's terrible. We've ruined it. My maintenance guy is a Jehovah's Witness, and he's like, this is God's fury and floods and fires, and God's punishing us all for the way that we've treated the earth. I don't see it that way anymore. And I think a lot of my guests have validated that the messages they're receiving and did receive on the other side was, it's hitting a boiling point for a reason, because it's all about to change.
Well, here's another component that I don't know whether this is true or not, but if Earth is getting a lot more attention, and there are a lot more Christian Sundbergs out there, there could be a lot of people that are coming in choosing to have challenging experiences to help them evolve.
Yeah.
So that, we'll talk about a former president, I won't mention the name, but a lot of people say, what a terrible thing that this country's had to go through. Well, maybe that's something we chose to do.
Yeah.
All right, I was a non-physical entity, and I'm deciding what's my next experience. What do I want to have from my next experience? Oh, look at this little opportunity in this particular time on Earth. There's going to be a lot of turmoil, and we're going to get a chance to experience things that aren't available in other places in the non-physical. I don't know
Right.
whether that there's merit to
Yeah.
that or not, but we, I don't think we can really know, but at least we know that we can't judge things through purely human eyes.
That's right.
Things won't become apparent to us maybe until we actually shed this human form and re-enter what we really are. Well, we've been at this for a while. I have had all kinds of questions I could be asking you, Shannon, but I want to give other people a chance to pose some questions to you. So we've got enough people on here. What I'd prefer people do is raise your hand. You can do that if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button. And one of the things you can do is raise your hand. And depending on the order, we'll call on people. I see we have one hand raised already. Bill Lenfesty is pretty experienced at this, and I knew he'd be one of the first. Bill, go ahead. Why don't you unmute and pose your question?
I had two questions. First of all, because I've always thought that the spirits that we're getting in touch with were always helpers. But I was just wondering, is it ever possible to get hold of one that might be a little bit malevolent, who hasn't quite gotten all of his negatives out and says, I'm going to mess this guy back on Earth up a little bit because he doesn't know what he's doing, and just because I can do it. I mean, it's is it possible that that can still happen? Do you think?
I
And we
Here's
hope
what
it doesn't.
yeah, what I feel about those kinds of things, I think that this is something that I'm still exploring, and everyone has a different answer. All of my guests, I ask questions like this all the time. As a medium, I've never felt a dark energy in my life. I've never had experience with a dark energy or even just a playful jerk of a spirit. I don't want to say that they don't exist because I know many people that have had experiences where and I don't negate their experiences just because I haven't had them. But I always feel that as long as you are in a higher vibration yourself, I'm sure there have been lots of dark entities. I don't necessarily think, for me, I don't believe they're entities as much as spirits who have crossed over, and they may have, they their own consciousness is sort of a dark place, and they've had a lot of healing to do, and maybe they're not at the same healing level as some other spirits. I'm not saying that doesn't exist or that doesn't happen, but I do know that as somebody myself who's had years deep in addiction where I was living out of integrity, out of alignment, things were not going well for me, and I wanted to take my life, and I was very, very depressed and acting in ways that were uh, of betraying my own soul, my own and treating myself terribly, and by default treating other people terribly just by virtue of being very selfish. And I can say that if there was a time where any kind of force got a hold of me, that's when it would be doing things that are so against my
Is
integrity.
is
And mhm.
is there a danger? There was a story that was in the one in the New Testament where Jesus came upon a couple guys that were supposed to be possessed by demons, and one explanation was that they had been monkeying around with stuff on the astral plane, and they actually unleashed some kind of a spirit that was stronger than they were, and it got hold of them and wouldn't turn them loose. Uh, have you ever felt like that? There's a danger when you're doing stuff that might happen, that you get into something
I
you can't handle.
don't. I don't. Now I could be. I don't know. All I'll say is I don't have enough experience in that area. I personally don't believe in dark forces or hell or anything like that. I feel like hell is what we create in our own minds. Hell is what even people who've seen hell in their near-death experiences, some of them have said to me, I realized it was because that's what I expected to see when I went there because I was raised religious or I had a fear. And it was more of a symbol or a presentation for God to give me a message. And again, I don't know. I'm not saying I know. My personal feeling and my personal experience is that I'm not afraid of dark forces. I think everything's an imprint, even going to haunted places because I do volunteer site, like to do mediumship work at a Civil War hospital in Virginia, where a lot of bad stuff, I mean, horrific stuff happened. And for me, I don't feel bad energy in there. I feel like there's energy that lingers, and it's basically an imprint of negative things that happened. But I personally don't feel like if I go in there, I'm going to come out possessed or they're going to mess with my life. But people say it's happened to them. So I'm open-minded. I just personally don't
Okay.
worry about it.
Yeah, Bill, you seem to have stimulated some interest. I see a lot of hands have gone up.
Yeah.
I'll throw a quick comment out. I'm concerned about manifestation. What you believe, you manifest. And there are some denominations, religious cults even, that want you to believe in demonic possession, and it's a fear-based thing. So my word of caution is people need to be careful, because if you get sucked into believing that you're a sinner and that you deserve punishment, maybe you'll manifest that. We need to focus on our core spiritual being, and we aren't evil. So when we do make our transition, or if we open up to spirit, we're not attracting negative energy.
Yeah, I don't believe evil's outside of us is what it's something that we can create and we can foment with our own thoughts.
Nancy, you got your hand raised. You were the next one on the list. You want to unmute and pose your question?
Yeah, I want to find out, like, whether you do readings and how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, I won't, yeah, I'll just throw out there that, thank you for asking that, by the way. I'll just say that you can email me and I'll maybe Jim, I don't know if I can just email it in a little chat, but you can just email me. I had a website, but it's easier. I'm finding it's too glitchy. Just contact me at magicisrealshannon@gmail. And my podcast is called Magic is Real. So for any reason you don't see it there, you can go to the YouTube, look up Magic is Real, and in all the descriptions, it'll have how to reach me. So
Okay.
thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you later, but now it done that for me. Valerie, you got your hand raised. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry about that.
I can hear you.
Oh, great. First, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your views about us all being one and that we're here for love. I totally resonate with that. I have a question. I was had a near-death experience in 1984. I was in a car wreck, and as a team was working on me at the hospital, I was up above them and watching them do their thing. And so I've always been fascinated with spirit and the other world. And lately, I've come to learn about Akashic records. And I just wondered if you had any experience with Akashic records.
Thank you, Valerie, for sharing that. I know I was like, oh gosh, do I have questions for you? I feel like you probably know more about Akashic records than I do. I know that they exist. I know they're records, for lack of a better term, of everything that's ever happened and ever will happen. But I honestly am not an expert in it at all. I actually fell asleep doing Akashic records meditation last night, though, because I too am curious about it. It feels like an abstract. It feels like the cloud, like it feels like the cloud. It feels like something like that, where it's something unnameable that we can't really relate to. So when I hear Akashic records, I think of like a library, like an old library with like
Yes.
books that it feels like something out of like Harry Potter. Yeah, and I still don't know a ton about it, honestly. I'd love to hear if anyone else does.
I've had an Akashic record reading.
Oh, yeah.
And he went back into some of my previous lives, and only the ones that had to do with my life today and how those previous lives are affecting my life today. And it was fascinating, just fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to have that done one day too. I just don't know how to connect with it myself, or how to I'm not an expert in connecting for other people in that area either, but it is fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There are people who've had near-death experiences and others who've had out-of-body experiences that visit this massive library, and they're taken to a place in that library and shown a book, and that book is their book of their life. So the concept, and that's kind of a representation. I think that it's what I understand is that the Akashic records, it's really, there's a database of information. Every experience we have gets recorded. But then it's more than that, because the Akashic records supposedly are records of the future as well, which is aligned with the notion that the idea that things happen sequentially is from a human perspective. From a spirit perspective, it's all happening at the same time. So Akashic records being a summation of everything that's ever happened, everything that's going to happen, maybe even an infinite collection of things that possibilities of things that could happen. I think there's some evidence that indicates that this database of information exists.
Yeah, I just find it fascinating. I think as we raise our consciousness and make better choices, we can affect our future. And so anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Earlier, Mark Brooks had indicated he had a question, but he can't raise his hand because he's a co-host. So I'm going to call on Mark at this point to pose his question.
Thanks, Jim. Shannon, I am doing a lot of work on psychic abilities, and I call them spiritual abilities. But one of the things or thoughts that I've had is that what we're seeing today is really an indication of humanity's next physical evolution. And I wondered if you agreed with that or disagreed. Do you think these psychic abilities that people are having is really manifested because it's a physical evolution of humanity?
In a sense, I in the sense that we're all born with these abilities, but most of us forget them just because of the world that we live in. If you or culturally too, like the Native Americans, for example. It's sort of my friend I was telling you about that I was speaking with, she's Native American, grew up on a reservation. So to her, mediumship was just second nature. It's not that her abilities were necessarily stronger than mine or yours. It's that her culture encouraged it. Therefore, they were noticing it more and they were aware of it more. Therefore, it continued to build and develop. Then, but in sort of civilized technological society in the United States specifically, there's a lot of moving away from that. We have to go to school, we have to learn a job skill, we have to think logically a lot of the time. So we don't cultivate or nurture that as much as we might. And so over time, we switch our awareness to things that are more earthly, tangible, money. How do we make money? How do we work? How do we build structures, organizations? Well, it seems to me, though, that when Jim asked me, or I think it was you that said, were you hesitant to come out about it? I think had I come out about this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have gotten, you're crazy, you're delusional. I've gotten nothing but love from people and people who are interested. So I think also it's helped that we now have so much information on the internet, but also TV shows like Tyler Henry's Psychic Medium and a lot of and Gaia coming out now with so many different programs. And I think we're all looking for something more because it's hard. Like there's a lot of hard stuff happening in this world. But to answer your question specifically, I think that there's more of an awakening. There's still plenty of people who are skeptics and plenty of people who think that this is all nonsense. However, it's becoming more mainstream, and that feels like part of what you said, the part of the evolution. And a lot of my guests have said, and the aliens and the interdimensional beings have said, that it is all part of, we're coming to a boiling point, but we're getting to a point where more and more people are coming to the surface that are like us, that are aware of what's really going on. and that really there are more and more light workers or people showing up with more love and more leading with intuition. In fact, I just saw the movie Avatar too, and basically that film was so beautiful. I thought it was going to be cheesy, and it was, but it was beautiful. It basically summed up everything that I think is happening right now. They're a little on the nose with the theme. I mean, it's obvious. It's like the corporations versus the spiritual. But it's about, I think more and more of us are remembering who we are, which can only help in the end. Now we just wish people like, Putin would remember who he is. But that's the thing. And I don't really know how we get past people who,
So is it possible that Putin and his ilk creates stress in our population, and that stress causes us to seek alternatives instead of being comfortable? Oh, I got a job, I want to buy a new car, all that human side stuff. We have enough pain going on in our lives that kind of acts as a prod for us to seek spiritual meaning for things.
Yeah. And so it's the same thing you said before, about that could be part of the evolution is that stuff is happening to force us to say, this is not, whatever this isn't what we are. This is not going to work.
Hmm. Reka, you've got your hand raised. Why don't you unmute yourself and pose your question?
Hi, am I audible?
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Thanks, both of you. You guys are doing a great job, and it's really helping us evolve. So kudos to both of you. My question is, sorry if it's silly, but I always was wondering, I think Shannon, you're the right person to ask. So one fine day in the morning, I heard in my mind my name being called in a female voice. And I always wonder who you think it might be.
So I actually have an answer for that, which
Thank
isn't necessarily, it isn't necessarily an answer. Like I could intuitively feel into that, but here's what I'm going to say about it is how you know who that is, right?
Yeah,
I mean, interestingly, I don't know if your mother was in spirit at the time, but it just happens to feel like that when I feel into it, but only you, I'm trying to word this, really know. I think, okay, so people ask me all the time, how do I know when it's a sign from spirit? And my answer is, you just know. So you may have intuitively known who it was, but
the
you
voice
didn't trust
was,
yourself. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, Shannon. The
No.
voice was completely new. It's a female voice, and
Yeah.
I could hear in my head, not with my ears.
Right.
But I don't know if it's my angel or no one passed, so I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not expecting anyone, so it's my guardian angel or my spirit guide. How do I even? I keep asking, please, who is it? And I'm so lost. And I was just curious.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
yeah, I guess I can answer that because what I was going to say is I
okay.
don't know who it was, but and I know it's hard because you're doing what we all do. It's like, who is it? You're trying to think about it and who could it be? In general, this may not answer the question immediately, but it's one of those things where you know what it is? It's don't overthink it. Because what I've learned as a medium is the first thing that comes to you is usually the answer. So granted, now you've had time and you've probably overthought it to a million degrees, but you're doing exactly the right thing. Asking, hey, if there's someone trying to reach out to me, just make it clear. I'm just asking for clarity. And just don't overlook, but look for some signs that confirm. So when you see a sign like a feather, well, is it just a feather or is it a feather from, a mother figure in your life or something? The way you know, it's as simple as you just know. And it's really your own intuition that will know the answer. Now, and when I say that, what I mean is if in that moment you had said, okay, who's there? And the first thing you heard was spirit guide. That's usually what it is. It's hard to answer because I don't know, without sitting in front of you and kind of delving in. And even then I would have said, like, if I were doing a reading for you, I would say, I'm just telling you what I feel, but don't take this as the word because I'm just a human being. But what I'm feeling is it might be this person. But I think we all have this knowing, and it just comes down to trust.
Okay. So
It's,
they might reach out even if we are not expecting, like it
oh
can.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And who knows why? Maybe they just wanted to make themselves known. Maybe you were going through something and they wanted to give you a little support. Maybe it was just a long lost loved one from time, maybe it's grandmother from the past, just, I'm here. But I think it's not a very exciting answer, but the answer really is in that moment, all you have to do is just kind of say, all right, who is it? And don't stop to think. Just
Okay.
let it fall into your lap. That's kind of how I just try to say, drop it in, just let it drop in and trust what you get. It's not going to be the fireworks. It's not going to be a definitive answer. You have to just trust what you're feeling, which is hard for us to do, but also easy for us. It's easier than we think. I think we're overcomplicating it, is my point.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for your
Thank you.
question. You're so sweet.
That's a good question. Yeah. Thanks, Reka. Ron, want to unmute yourself? Ron, are you still there? Can you unmute yourself? There you are. No, we can't hear you. You've got to unmute yourself, Ron. Maybe I can do that. You're still
I think
muted.
this better.
There,
we
we
go.
got you.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Ron.
First of all, I'd like to validate your point about we make our own heaven and hell. You call it the message that I had with my near-death experience. Believe in yourself. You create your own heaven and hells. Keep doing what you're doing in, with, as love. And my question to you is, do you keep getting reminded to get it straight over and over again? I've had many car accidents that I should be dead. One of them I came back, and just last week I had a seizure. Grandma on the middle of nowhere, picked myself up and walked away. But why are these happening?
Oh, wow. You mean like you had a near-death experience and then you keep kind of having, maybe not the same experience, but you keep having these brushes with death or these almost death experiences. That is an interesting one. I mean, again, I wouldn't necessarily know, but I think it's interesting to think about that. I mean, gosh, that's a really good question. What do you think? I think the question is like, do you have an inner knowing about what that is?
Sharing love, if anything. It's just I get this power that I love being alive.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's beautiful. And it could just be that. It could just be this constant,
yeah.
like, you're still here. You're still here. I wish that's a beautiful, thank you for sharing what you did too. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were sharing your experience and what the message that you heard. It's gorgeous. It's so beautiful, but I don't even know the answer to that because I think everyone's experience is so different, right? And I think it's like, you kind of know, I keep being faced with death, and then for whatever reason, and it could just be a message that's saying you're not meant to go yet. You know, you're still go.
I've had 5 major brain surgeries, Shannon, and I've had seizures for over 40 years, and I'm still so okay. I haven't got it yet.
Exactly. I don't think it's a matter. Yeah, and I think it's not a matter of getting it. It's just a reminder of like, you're still here, dude. You're a survivor, and there's a reason why you're here. And part of that is, yes, just to love the ones in your life and to show love and receive love, but also just to share what you just shared with us. Just your existence in this world is a gift to everyone because you are one of those people that gets it. And there's so many people out there that don't, and I don't mean get it from like we're superior. I just mean that gets what we're really here for and understands that we're here to love one another and be compassionate and to help and to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down, which is what so many, just look at social media any day of the week. Try posting anything. I used to post on Facebook and I would be like, I would post the most loving thing and suddenly everyone took it wrong and was attacking everybody. And I'm like, I could post like the sky is blue and people would start tumbling into some kind of a fight. Everybody wants to cause drama. So I think that I'm so happy you're here. And and it'll be fine when you go. I'm sure it'll be the most beautiful experience for you, but I'm glad you're here, selfishly.
Can I say something, Shannon, to you? It says on this side of the card, you are awesome. Read the other side out loud passionately.
I am awesome.
I've been giving these away for 20 years and they're across the country.
You are so, I love you. You are so awesome. You are so awesome. And that's what I mean. Just you're a spreader of love and joy. And
Yes.
it's like someone might just be having a bad day, they're having a down day, and all you have to do is turn to them with those dimples, hand them a card, and suddenly they're like, well, just look, there's such goodness in this world. And I think that's why you're not being taken. You're still going. I'm sorry that you have to, suffer with health challenges. It's never fun, but it's definitely, you're supposed to be here or you wouldn't be.
I know that. It's a journey, and whatever
Yeah.
comes I just love it.
Oh,
And joyfully grateful just to be alive.
yes. Love it. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
that. You're so beautiful. Thank you.
So we don't have any more hands raised, but what I'd like to do is pose a question to you, Shannon. Are there any subjects that we haven't talked about that you'd like to bring up?
I feel like we really did it. I feel like thank you everybody for your great questions and Jim for letting me go on and on. Cause yeah, there's so much, but I think I kind of hit the bullet points of what I'm learning about that death is not the end, that death is just a transition. And I heard Laura Jackson, what's her name? Laura something Jackson. She's a medium and she said, we are all playing out like a role. This is a theater. It's like theater. This is a play that we're all acting out. And at the end of the play, we all meet up backstage. Like we all just meet up backstage and we hug each other and we say, well done. And we bring each other flowers. It's like, and believe me, I think the most beautiful gift that this has given me, and I hope this is why I think a lot of us are drawn to this topic if we haven't necessarily had an out-of-body experience ourselves, or is just the fact that, I mean, life gets challenging. And one of my guests said this week, I mean, it feels so real. Like we can preach spirituality all we want, but then when we lose somebody or we lose a job or we're having money problems, suddenly it's like, oh, wait. It's hard to remember, it's hard to keep in that frame of mind of like, it's all good. It's all happening for a reason. But I think that we have challenges, but knowing this makes it so much easier to navigate. It doesn't mean we're not going to feel. I think that's the other thing. And especially as a medium, I talk about this a lot too, because part of my job is grief counseling. I don't have a degree, but that is what the job is really being there for somebody and holding space for them in their grief. And I never say to a client, they're in a better place. I say, I know that nothing is going to take away the pain of missing someone that you love, of having someone walk alongside you, of hearing their voice, of hugging them, holding them, having them support you in times of pain. But I hope that this brings you some comfort, knowing that you will see them again and that they are here just in another room, but I don't mean that in a glib way. I mean it in the sense that it doesn't mean grief is going to end because you know that. It doesn't mean you're not going to feel so much pain. And I wish that grief did have an endpoint, but it doesn't. There's grief. I guess that's the thing that we, as spiritual as we all are, and, that we are exploring these topics, grief is very real. And even though we know it's not forever, and that one day we'll be on the other side and it'll all make sense, it's also okay to honor the human experience. I think that's sort of where my answer is leading. It's okay to honor the human experience, acknowledge grief, acknowledge that death is very sad. And it's hard to lose somebody who you'll never see again in that form. You know, that our bodies die and that's the last you'll see of it. But it does bring me comfort and hope, and I hope it brings everyone else comfort and hope too, that when the time comes, death is not to be feared. I'm more afraid of losing somebody that I love. But me being afraid of death, no. And that's because of this community, people like you that have, Valerie, Ron, that have shared your stories. You're doing such a service because death is scary. Uncertainty is scary. And it just gives us a little bit of calm to know that the worst thing in the world that can happen is that you die. And that's actually not the worst thing that can happen to you. I mean, people think death is the worst thing. It's not. This is the worst. This stuff here is the worst stuff. Death is a reprieve and a beautiful new life, really.
Well, Shannon, I want to thank you for participating this evening. You shared a lot of your insights, and I suspect that a lot of people got a lot out of this. Keep doing your work, keep developing your skills. Maybe we'll see you in next Labor Day, and
Yes.
we'll have some new stories to tell. Who knows what new insights you'll have. So
yes, and I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, for taking the time. You know, none of us are getting paid for this, and so we do it because we are passionate about it. We love the community. It's connection. So I want to thank every single one of you for being here too, because that's what it's all about. It's about connection, and that's why we do this. So I couldn't do it without you.
Mark, do you want to comment on upcoming events?
Oh boy. I know of two, and I hope I get the dates right. The first one is a Metaphor.Inc. Presentation on February 24th, and that's with the co-hosts of the Skeptic Metaphysicians podcast. And for people who are interested in writing in the spiritual and metaphysical genre, or are interested in writing, we're exploring podcasting as a way to market your book, or market yourself, market your brand when you get your book done, and even before you write your book and get your book published. So I hope you'll join us for that. And then March 28th, we're going to talk about spiritual emergencies. And we have someone, oh God, I'm having a brain fart right now. Elizabeth Savet is going to be with us. She's been with us before a couple years ago, but she's going to talk about spiritual emergencies and what they are, what you can do to help people who are having spiritual emergencies, and just give you some tips and techniques of how to deal with it. And it's something that very few people have dealt with, but some people have these problems. And that's one of the things we feel is important for everybody to know, is how to help someone who's having an issue with their spiritual life. So I hope you'll join us for that on March 28th.
Yeah, Daniel just posted something in the chat. I was going to call on him next. Daniel, you want to comment briefly? We do have an event coming up on February 7th with Dr. K. Can you add a couple of comments?
Yes, definitely. Next Tuesday, 7 o'clock, right here, same bat station. Dr. K will be with us for 12 Steps to Spiritual Transformation for a lively interview. And he's the founder of Children of Infinity. He has a PhD in physics and has been on the spiritual path for about 12 years, or been teaching it for about 12 years. And thank you, Shannon, for an awesome event tonight.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.
Your microphone setup is awesome. You sound wonderful. What are you using?
Thank you. Well, this is a Studio Bricks recording booth, a Neumann TLM 103, Scarlett Solo, I always forget, Scarlett Solo Focusrite preamp, and that's about it. Yeah. For any of you that are geeks.
Just a minor investment.
Yeah, yeah. This alone was $10,000 and shipped from Spain. I'm just going to tell you that much right now. So it better sound good.
Nothing like a home studio.
I know.
Well, we did post Shannon's email address if you want to reach out to her. Maybe you'd like to ask for your own reading.
And that, or just please reach out to just to introduce yourselves to. And if anyone has a near-death experience and they want to talk about it on the podcast or anything at all, I'd love to hear from you and connect with you. Also, if anyone is on Instagram, it's Real Magic Shannon, because I like to connect with, that's my spiritual page, and it's good to connect with everybody and see what they're doing and like workshops they have and stuff like that too.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to bring this
Thanks,
to a
everybody.
close.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jim.
Shannon.
Big hug. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is really fun.